At least the larger firms, they have not abandoned 2002 compliance. They may be revisiting it a bit in 2026, but maybe the level of compliance or how they comply, things like that. But they definitely have not felt secure enough to say that this has gone away. Certainly, there's a lot of turmoil at the Department of Labor, just like every other agency that we've seen in the federal government. They have taken some actions, but in the areas around what we want to talk about today, which is PTE 2022 and advice and things like that, there hasn't been a lot. That was partly due because Daniel Aronowitz, who is the Assistant Secretary in charge of Employee Benefit Security Administration, he wasn't confirmed until September 18th, I believe, and then less than 2 weeks later, they shut the government down. So he hasn't really had a lot of opportunity to get things going on the regulatory agenda, which would include the definition of investment advice. But yeah, definitely for folks on the call, it was kind of this year. So what do we do now? I mean, there was a lot of questions around that. And a lot of that was driven by the litigation against the Department of Labor's efforts to expand the definition of investment advice. And that's occurred in two different ways. One was through its prohibited transaction exemption 2020-02, which basically said that a rollover recommendation from a plan or even from an IRA or a transfer recommendation to another account that's qualified like an IRA would be the first or could be the first recommendation of an ongoing advice relationship or investment management relationship if you're going to do discretionary management. And thus, that recommendation to roll over would in fact be advice. And that was a major change. By the way, I think people kind of forget that came out during the Trump administration. So that is not a creature of the Biden administration. The Biden administration, on the other hand, when they got into office, tried to revamp the definition of investment advice again, much like they did back in 2015, maybe not quite as broadly, but pretty darn close, and then tried to funnel everybody into this PTE 2020-02 exemption. And kind of pushed aside a lot of the exemptions that folks rely on, particularly the insurance industry. So they were subject to legal challenges. The PTE 2020-02, there was a Q&A that described how it applied, and that got shot down by the Middle District of Florida, a district court, but that court didn't address 2002. And then another court, Northern District of Texas, actually upheld the Department of Labor's interpretation within PTE 2020-02. In other words, they just said that the DOL had the authority to do that. The retirement security rule is being litigated right now, and that's kind of in limbo because of the change in administration. We're kind of waiting to see what happens. I think, most of us think it'll go away pretty soon, but that still is an open question.